Hello YouTube, Stainless here with another knife slash story video for you. I'm going to tell a story that was told to me by my father when I was a small child, and it stuck with me through these years, and I just wanted to put it out there for other people to enjoy. Also, I like talking about multi-tools, pens, watches, and pocket knives. And I found a couple of knives that probably work with this story, kind of fit with the theme in the story. What I have here is the Ator Army knife, one of the Ator Army knives. Ator is a Spanish brand made in Spain. They also make Swiss Army style type knives. For comparison, this is a Victorinox Fieldmaster, or I take it back, Victorinox Huntsman. It is a multi-tool, made in Spain. Very robust, thick blade. Could use it hard. It's pretty hefty too as far as knives go. Just another comparison is the blade on the Victorinox Swiss Army knife. It's just thinner, but Victorinox knives, I've always found these to be very robust in and of themselves. But this one is a beast compared to it. This blade also has a liner lock to keep it open. Here's the Ator Swiss Army style knife. Spain. Made in Spain. I'm not sure how old that Swiss Army knife is. This is the original packaging. Ator. Of course, it's in Spanish. I think maybe Portuguese also. Of course, you gotta have the little dog and the bowl of fruit. Ator brand. Spain. The story involves the ghost of a conquistador. Conquistadors were the Spaniards, Europeans that came to the New World and conquered it. They carried blades, probably swords, that were made, they had a really nice sword. In my research, I found that weapons, well, steel was a very expensive commodity in this time period. A nice sword, good sword, high quality sword, was an investment. When I was trying to find maybe a way to relate it and what something would cost today, a really good sword would cost you about what would cost us for a car, just to give you an idea. So they weren't just weapons, but they were very expensive tools. And of course they were coveted and could be heirlooms. The Spaniards, if they were lucky and had the best swords that could be afforded to them, these swords probably came from a city in Spain at the time. We're talking about 1400s, 1500s. The best swords came out of Spanish swords came out of a town called Toledo. And there was a particular broadsword. It was a two-edged sword. Well, you could probably classify it as a rapier. I'm not an expert. It was a long two-edged sword, fine point at the end. You could hack, slash, and stab with it. It could have a guard on the handle. For sure it had a crossbar. But this is likely what the Spaniards carried. These swords from Toledo, Spain. The story begins, I would say, pretty much the same time frame as the first story I told. Probably the late 19th century, 1800s, or early 20th century, maybe the 19-aughts, 1910, 12, in a very rural area. You had a Mexican family living on a farm or a ranch, basically scraping by, a sustenance living type situation. They lived off the land that they tilled and the animals that they raised. Back then, they did not enjoy the social safety nets that we have today, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. When you got old and you still needed to contribute as much as you could, and you probably wanted to contribute, might have kind of helped pass their time and make you feel important and vital, and you were still part of the family. So kind of like if you ever watched the Waltons back in the 70s, an older generation would, if they could work, they'd do what work that they could, maybe domestic type work, cooking, cleaning, looking after the kids. It kind of helped, these older people kind of help keep the family together. They were that glue, and they also were sort of like libraries. They were repositories for the wisdom, experience, maybe what herbs or remedies or how to, what we would call first aid today, minor medical treatment. They were very useful in that way. And again, there were repositories for the culture, passing down knowledge, family history, and telling stories. Could contribute to the family's entertainment. In our story, in this rural area, we would have like the grandmother, she was the matron of the family. We're going to call her Magdalena. Magdalena did a lot of the domestic chores. She cooked and she would clean. She'd look after the small children. Well, one night, she woke up in the wee hours of the night, went to the outhouse. They didn't have indoor plumbing, so she had to traverse a considerable distance. We're spoiled in that we just have to walk down the hall and go into our indoor bathrooms. She would have to, cross out into a field and use the outhouse, wherever it happened to be at that time. Well, one night, she noticed in the field, she was walking to the outhouse, a bluish orb just gently floating up and down across the field. These orbs in different cultures, they can have different meanings. It could be real ominous, it could be will-o'-the-wisp, things to be feared. Even in Latin American culture, if you see an orb higher up in the sky, it could be a lechuza, and that's a female witch, and it could be a story for another time. But some people would take these little orbs close to the ground as harbingers of treasure. Someone's treasure was buried nearby, and this could be the spirit of the former owner that's still obsessing and still tied to this plane of existence and watching over their treasure, coveting their treasure. Well, several nights passed and she noticed this orb. She kept it to herself, and she pretty much was able to triangulate on where it was. So she decided, tonight, purposely, I'm going to be out in that field around this time that this orb makes its trek down, its usual trek across the field, and she's going to intercept it. Her hope, her aim, was to hopefully find this treasure that this orb is coveting or protecting or heading towards. So she's out in the field, everyone's asleep, it's the wee hours of the night. The orb approaches. She's not scared, she believes that it is a harbinger of fortune. But she's nervous, like I said. Orbs can have other meanings. They could be other type of supernatural entities that are to be feared. Was the orb approached, the human-like figure began to materialize, and as it got closer and closer to her, it solidified, and it took on the form of a Spanish conquistador. Spanish conquistadors are an archetype for Mesoamerican natives, descendants of Mesoamericans, Latinos of Central, not so much South America, for sure, Central America for sure, and Southern North America, southern parts of North America. It's an archetype of, to be feared. It can be an authoritarian archetype, a deliberator like a judge, a strong character type of leadership type of character. It's an archetype that's to be taken seriously and respected, to be sure. And of course, it could, like the conquistadors did, it could be a conquering type of aggressive archetype, which could come about rotting your destruction. Conquistador presented himself to her, knew who she was, addressed her, Magdalena. I have a buried treasure nearby, and it is yours to claim, but understand, claiming this treasure will cost you your life. That's the bargain. Your family will never want for anything, but you will not live to enjoy this fortune. I will return tomorrow night for your answer. Of course, Magdalena didn't sleep. She pondered this. She thought about it a lot. Could barely contain herself, and it was noticeable that she obviously had something on her mind. She weighed it quite heavily that whole day into the evening, and she was out in that field to meet the conquistador again. This orb begins its approach as it has before, and this figure began to solidify out of the ether. It was the conquistador, and he spoke to her, Magdalena, what is your decision? And she said, I respectfully decline this treasure. I think my family is going to need me, or they need me to be a part of their lives more than they're going to need this treasure. And Conquistador nodded in acknowledgement and disappeared. The orb was never to be seen in the field again. Magdalena lived the rest of her years as she had the last several, spending time with her family, the young children, helping out with domestic chores, and she got to enjoy their company till her last day. That story always stuck with me, and I always wondered, again, this wasn't thick Michael Crichton novel with lots of details, but it got me to thinking what was going on in Magdalena's mind. You know, what were the factors that she weighed? There was obviously greed, you get this money, but she's never going to be able to spend it. Fear for one's life, even though you're long in your years. Maybe she balanced that out. It's like, well, you know what? I don't know how long I have to live. I could make a big contribution to my family, but alive, I make a contribution. Maybe she really got in depth and thought that, you know what, if my family receives this big windfall, that could be very corrupting. That could break up a family. That could lead to a lot of problems. You just never know. So maybe she went with what she knew. But I don't have a large Toledo Salamanca broadsword to show you, but I do have some Spanish knives made in Spain, and they're very robust, really, really heavy. The Victorinox are actually surprisingly light for all the tools and versatility they bring to the table, and they are pretty robust. I've used these things most of my life, certainly all my adult life, even as a boy. I have abused and used them way beyond what they were designed for, and they've always held up. So I have no doubt in my mind that this thicker, heavier Ator knife, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I have no doubt in my mind that that would serve you well for any of those applications. And some of the tools are also compatible. I think some of these tools are a little dated. For example, I'll show you something I've seen this implement on older Victorinox and Wenger models. It is a nail file, if you can kind of see that rough part right here. And it would probably work as a nail file. And it has a very acute point at the end. I don't know if that's for cleaning your nails, but I don't think it would be an ice pick because it is a little thin. But that's my story for tonight. And maybe later I'll do a more in-depth review of these knives. I don't know the age of this knife. I suspect that it is probably at least 40 years old. I know in the 60s, early 70s, their Victorinox and Wenger knives had bails on them, which can be kind of handy. You can tie a lanyard to it and secure it to your belt. That way you don't lose it when you're out in the wild. Maybe working on a ladder or over water, and you won't lose it in the waves. But I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much. Have a great day.